Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas Kevin Dolan. I'm the writer and author of Little Fag, A Journey of Self-Acceptance and Healing. And today I'm honored to read Chapter 5. It's entitled Slowness is Now My Superpower. It begins on page 238 of my memoir. I grew tired of running. I no longer wished to move through life so quickly. The hardest lesson, it seemed, was to stand still. When confronted with an aspect of myself from which I wanted to run, I instead chose to be present and find my breath. I drew my experiences close around me, the light and the dark, and tried to love myself simply for not running away. Thich Nhat Hanh said it best. People say walking on water is a miracle, but to me, walking peacefully on earth is the real miracle. What I braved. I was the fastest kid on the block in elementary school, in junior high, and in senior high school. As I moved closer to a professional football career while in university, the measure of fast was running a 40-yard dash in 4.6 seconds. I ran it in 4.4 seconds. This gay boy could run. Sprinting was my specialty. I loved the feeling of going fast and loved knowing no one could catch me even more. I have a body memory of the agility and freedom that moving fast and stealthily brought me. It might have been my drug of choice as a kid. After my second warm weather track and field training camp at Cal State Long Beach decades ago, I remember being fascinated by the strength of my teammates who ran distances. What would it be like to be that strong? Not realizing it at the time, I planted a seed to begin to slow down. In 1990, at the Gay Games in Vancouver, I ran a marathon. The year-long training I did prior to that race, while living in Calgary, was spiritual. I loved it. I ran alone, with the exception of my first 21-mile run. I loved moving slow. Although there were times when I grieved not being able to move as fast as I was able, I noticed a tinge of relief as well. It's as if life was inviting me to slow down, metaphorically. I was using sprinting as a means of negotiating life when there was a far gentler way available to me to move by. When I sprinted, funnily enough, life wasn't a blur. I do remember the horrendous burning sensation my sprint would elicit from my muscles, and the vomiting that signified I had sprinted hard enough when I eventually stopped. It was a brutal physical feat that, strangely, I loved. When I first began the internal work and reflection of who I was, I did say to my therapist, "Can we do this as fast as we can?" With deep compassion in his voice, he said, "This won't be a sprint. We might start at a crawl. We might get you to stand up. Walking might be next. But I guarantee you it will be slow. Are you okay with that?" He respectfully asked. "I trust slow," I quietly responded. I really had no idea how to take things slow. Circumstances in my family always changed fast. One day we had a telephone, and the next day it was gone. The dining room table I had breakfast on one morning was gone when I got home from school. A lightning-fast change occurred, and nobody ever talked about why. So, of course, I thought it was normal. Yet, as an adult and with an opportunity to become a responsible adult, jumping out of the fire was not an ethos that encouraged slowness. I reflect on the opportunity lost because I thought I had to say yes or no on the fly. There wasn't any wise counsel available to me. That was the case with an athletic scholarship offer to St. Francis Xavier University. I panicked, thinking I had to give an answer right away. From that place of fear, seldom did a yes emerge. Sprinting, at its essence, is all about reacting to the gun that starts the race, not anticipating it. I grew up in an environment that had me always in anticipation mode. Would Dad be drunk? Would the welfare check arrive on time? Would the neighbors judge us? Would my friends play with me? It was exhausting. As much as I wanted to live in a different place that might be easier and gentler, sprinting always afforded me an opportunity to react. It provided the fuel to make a quick exit and, at times, keep myself safe. I specialized in being out of breath. I can see now the havoc it created in my life. It took me until 1998 to sprint my last race. It also came at another set of games, this time in Amsterdam. I'd been feeling this discomfort about racing again, but used denial to ignore it. I would eventually discover that the work I was doing to slow down my inner life was compromised if I still sprinted in my outer life. Amsterdam was the last time I'd sprint. I mentioned sprinting not causing my eyesight to be blurry, but what it did was narrow the width of what I could see. For most of my life, I ran in one lane. That's all I could see as a sprinter. What I braved was trusting that if I stopped zooming through life in a vain attempt to keep up with my sprinting brain, I could choose between doing something quickly or doing it right. Ease and effortlessness was never an option while sprinting through life. The unlearning. My biggest gift to myself is a connection to and an honoring of my little boy. After all, this was the aspect of me that always felt the need to sprint. This little guy, for years, tried to let me know how important feeling safe was, yet I always thought it was someone else's job. In a former relationship, I learned and looked to my partner to keep me safe. In business, it was my employer. Growing up, it was my family. Now, being married, there's a part of me that thinks it's my husband's job. Creating safety is my job, adult Thomas's job. There's a lot to breathe into, considering the balance of how my little boy cared for me for a lot of my adult life. I can do this. By creating a presence with my little boy, I can now hear him ask for safety, and I am finally living up to being his protector. I've taken significant steps to build trust with him. He's finally at a place where moving slower is something he likes. Over 2 decades of my life, I've committed myself to really listening to him. His requests are brilliant, simple, and always in line with what I need to feel safe. For such a young aspect of me, he possesses such compassion and empathy. His sense of humor is divine. I've learned to laugh with life again. I now know how to play. When I don't listen, I can energetically feel the lack of safety around me. This little guy is brilliant. I love him so much, and the time I spend with him is worth it. With some profound support through therapy, coaching, and a few experiential workshops, I've learned how to connect with my inner child. I'm always striking up a conversation with him, a dialogue, not a monologue. It is vital I listen to him. I've written loving letters to him. Now he knows how much he is loved. I know it's vital I say nurturing things like, I love you, I hear you, thank you, I'm sorry, and please forgive me. He is also so gracious in hearing these sentiments from me. Although there aren't many, I do take time to look at photos of myself as a child and send him love. My focus is on his eyes. His soul shines through them. By pondering what I loved to do as a child and writing about it, it creates a powerful connection and reconnection to the young part of me. As often as I can, I invite him, and he consistently joins me for meditation. It is such a soothing balm for both of us. I realize now that by loving and healing my inner child, I can begin to authentically love myself and then, consequently, others. Plus, it allows me to move slowly in life. There's no longer a need to sprint. The unlearning for me has been in saying yes to my inner child and trusting it as the best way to empower myself. focus on mindfulness, and share the only moment I have with him, the present, I am blessed. Let me share a bit of a backstory, and it relates to wanting to use an image of my little boy as the front cover image for the book. And of course, as you can see, that's not the case. When I began to get a sense of what I wanted on there, the first thing that popped up, I have a beautiful photograph of this little guy of mine. He's probably between 3 and 4 years old. And as I began to ponder placing this photograph as the photograph for the book, I began to feel a tremendous dis-ease from him. I began to feel that he felt unsafe, and I didn't know what it was about. I've come to treasure, I don't like that feeling, but I've come to treasure its wisdom, and I've come to listen to it. So as I got into the design of the cover, that discomfort from him intensified. That feeling of safety from him became even stronger, and I didn't know what it was about. So I chose a round of therapy, actually, to understand what was the message from this little guy to me. And it took a little while to hear it, because I was hell-bent on him being the image for the book. I didn't have the title at the time. I didn't have Little Fag as the title at the time. It took me a long time to allow that title of the book, which of course is manifested in a story I share, but I was really clear that this little guy, this 3 to 4 year old, needed to be on the front cover of the book. He was having nothing of it, nothing. So the reflections in therapy centered around how my body felt in relation to having him pictured on the front of the book, and there was such tremendous comfort. And then the next better work was in meditation, getting in touch with my inner child and getting a sense of how it is he didn't want to connect to me, with the thought that he was going to be the image on the front cover. It took a long time to reestablish that trust and build a little bit of safety, even to have a conversation with him about what was going on for him around being featured as the image on the book. In the next session I had, as I sat quiet between sessions and just kind of held him where he needed to be, right? Afraid, not trusting, not feeling safe, not shaming him for having those feelings. Because ultimately my work as an adult would center around just being able to understand what my feelings were and be able to articulate them. And it was something I wasn't very good at. So in the second session, what my therapist encouraged me to do was to invite this aspect of me, right? To sit in a bit of a circle with me. And in the middle of the circle was my book. And I remember feeling how unsafe my little 3 to 4 year old felt, even sitting in that circle. But he was brave enough to do that with me. And when I allowed him room to share with me how he felt about the image of him as a 3 to 4 year old appearing in the front of the book, I remember him sharing with me that it was really scary for him. Right? He didn't say he was afraid. This is probably a 7-year-old version of me saying, it's really scary for me, Thomas. Really scary for me. And when I sat just in that scaredness with him, because what I wasn't going to do was to have him explain it to me, I could feel how scary it was for him. And when I eventually reached out to hold his hand so that I could get a better sense of what was underneath the fear for him, this is what I felt. I felt him not being ready for the world to see him. I felt him nudge me towards perhaps another image. And ultimately what I discovered was it was so scary for him to be propped up in front of the world as the image on this book. It was too scary for him. And that made sense because, of course, it's taken me a long time to have a relationship with him. It's taken a long time for he and I to bond. So to suddenly cast him as the feature on the front of this book, it made sense to me that it was scary. Absolutely made sense to me. And when I asked him if he was open to another version of him, although a grown-up version of him, would that feel a little bit more comfortable? And at the time, I had this hanging in my home in Vancouver, this image. And when I presented this, kind of in this meditation with him, even as I say this to you, I take a deep breath as he took a deep breath. And what I heard from him was that would be way safer for me. Would be way safer for me. So the honoring of our inner children, our inner child, is really important to create some degree of congruency in relation to how we move through our lives. He has been a profound teacher of times when I'm not even aware that he's feeling unsafe. He's been an immense partner in learning how to play. He has been a wisdom-filled, almost little Buddha when it comes to me understanding the dynamics of my life. So I still rely on him to whisper what's going on for him. But ultimately what I've established is that I will be the one that will move us through life. And he better trusts me to do that now. And from time to time when I find myself reacting in a way that a 7-year-old boy would react, I realize that I haven't done the work to have him understand what the circumstance is, so that he can be prepared, so that ultimately in a partnership, we can create a level of safety for ourselves, so that then the adult in me can take the hand of this inner child, this little boy in me, little Tommy, and have him come with me. Not drag him kicking and screaming, but having walk with me as a partner, right on a particular path in my life, depending on the circumstance. So I want to invite you, if you haven't done inner work with that inner child of yours, that inner boy, that inner girl, that inner non-binary, that inner trans, whatever that is for you. Because ultimately, to create a wholeness with that aspect of ourselves is, I really feel it's the way that we were meant to walk through life, in partnership. And there's been such a profound disconnect from many of us, from the child aspect of us. So in doing that, eventually, and obviously what we landed on was using this photograph, and I'll chat about it another time in terms of what it is and what it represents. But there was a big, just as I was about to say that to you, I noticed I took a big breath. There was a big sigh of relief, right, from little Tommy. And ultimately, I've not used it in really any promo yet as far as the book is concerned, because we're still building trust around, right, how it is that this image might be exposed at some point in time, and I want to do it actually in concert with him, and I want to do it in a way that has him understand that I'm right there with him.